The greenhouse was my sanctuary. 20 years of careful cultivation, rows of genetically modified barley stretching under reinforced glass, each plant a testament to precision and patience. The air hung thick with the earthy scent of soil and the faint sweetness of ripening grain. I'd just returned from the Agricultural Innovation Conference in Denver, my mind still buzzing with the recognition I'd received for my drought-resistant strain. That's when I heard them. Elise's laugh, throaty, intimate, drifted from her practice studio adjacent to the greenhouse. Not unusual. She often entertained colleagues from the orchestra, but something about the tone made me pause, my hand frozen on the door handle. "Bernard's so absorbed in his little plants," came her voice, clearer now. "Sometimes I wonder if he even remembers I exist." A male voice responded, low and familiar. Too familiar. "Maybe it's time you stopped being married to a man who treats you like fertilizer." Isaac. My brother Isaac. My blood turned to ice water. I pressed closer to the studio door, the wood cool against my ear. "The children barely see him anyway," Elise continued. "Julia asks me why Daddy loves his plants more than us. How do I answer that?" "You don't have to anymore." Isaac's voice was closer now, intimate. "We could be good together, Elise. Real good." The sound that followed, the soft rustle of fabric, a whispered endearment, hit me like a physical blow. My vision tunneled. 22 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built grain by grain. And this was what it had reduced to. I backed away from the door, my breathing shallow and rapid. Through the studio window, I caught a glimpse of them. Elise's head thrown back, Isaac's hands in her dark hair. The same hands that had helped me build this greenhouse. The same mouth that had toasted my wedding day. I didn't confront them. Not then. Instead, I drove to the nearest bar and sat nursing a whiskey I couldn't taste, my phone heavy in my pocket. By the time I returned home, Isaac's car was gone, and Elise was preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. "How was Denver, darling?" she asked, not looking up from the cutting board. Her wedding ring caught the kitchen light, my grandmother's ring, passed down through 3 generations. "Educational," I managed, the words scraping my throat raw. That night, I lay awake listening to Elise's even breathing beside me, my mind racing through possibilities and plans. The woman I'd loved since graduate school, the mother of my children, was sharing her body with my own brother. The betrayal was surgical in its precision, cutting through every assumption I'd built my life upon. The next morning, I called Lyle Grant, my graduate assistant. 28, brilliant, with the kind of street smarts that came from growing up poor in Detroit. He'd boxed semi-professionally before returning to school, and his loyalty to me was absolute. "Professor Fisher?" Lyle's voice crackled through the phone. "Everything all right? You sound—" "I need a favor, Lyle. Something off the books." We met at Murphy's Diner, a greasy spoon downtown where faculty never ventured. Lyle slid into the booth across from me, his dark eyes scanning my face with the intensity he usually reserved for lab data. "What's going on?" he asked without preamble. I told him everything. The overheard conversation, the studio window, the sick certainty that this wasn't their first encounter. Lyle listened without interruption, his expression growing steadily grimmer. "Damn, Professor," he said finally. "That's cold. Real cold. What do you need from me?" "Evidence," I said. "I need to know how long this has been going on, how deep it goes. Can you help me install some surveillance equipment, discreetly?" Lyle nodded slowly. "I know a guy. Electronics specialist, no questions asked. But, Professor, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes ignorance is easier." I thought of Julia and Emile, my 13 and 10-year-old children, sleeping peacefully while their mother plotted to tear their family apart. Ignorance is what got me here, Lyle. I'm done being ignorant. Over the next week, Lyle's contact installed micro cameras throughout the house. Bedroom, kitchen, Elise's studio, audio pickups so sensitive they could capture a whispered confession from across the room. I felt sick doing it, violating the sanctuary of my own home. But the alternative was living a lie. The evidence came fast and damning. Isaac visited 3 times that week alone, always when he knew I'd be at the university. They discussed not just their affair, but their plans, relocating to Budapest where Elise had been offered a position with the Philharmonic, taking the children, starting fresh. "Bernard won't fight it," Elise said on camera, adjusting her hair after their Thursday afternoon encounter. "He's too passive, too afraid of confrontation. He'll probably be relieved." Isaac, buttoning his shirt, smirked. "Always the little brother, even now. Remember when we were kids and I'd take his toys? He'd just watch and cry." This is bigger than toys, Elise warned, but she was smiling. That Friday, everything accelerated. I returned early from a department meeting to find a strange car in the driveway. Not Isaac's usual vehicle, but a black sedan with tinted windows. Through the surveillance feed on my phone, I watched Elise talking animatedly with a man I didn't recognize. He looked official, predatory. I parked down the block and called Lyle. Something's happening. Get over here now! When Lyle arrived, we watched from his truck as the stranger left, briefcase in hand. Elise stood in the doorway, her face flushed with excitement. Who was that? Lyle muttered. My phone buzzed with a text from Elise. Working late at rehearsal tonight, don't wait up. That's not rehearsal excitement, I said grimly. That's something else. We followed the sedan to a downtown law office. Through the lobby windows, we saw the man meet with someone I recognized from newspaper photos. Marcus Webb, the most aggressive divorce attorney in the state, the kind who specialized in asset destruction. They're not just planning to leave, Lyle said quietly. They're planning to destroy you first. My phone rang. Julia's number. Daddy? Her voice was small, scared. Mommy's acting weird. She's packing things, and Uncle Isaac keeps coming over. They whisper a lot, and when I asked what's wrong, Mommy said we might be going on a very long trip. My grip tightened on the phone. Where are you now, sweetheart? At Emily's house for a sleepover. But Daddy, I don't want to go on a long trip. I want to stay here with you and my friends. You will, baby. I promise you will. After I hung up, Lyle studied my face. Professor, whatever you're thinking, they're using my children as weapons, I said, my voice deadly calm. That crosses a line? What are you going to do? I stared at the law office, watching shadowy figures move behind the frosted glass. I'm going to show them what happens when you underestimate a botanist. That night, I accessed the security cameras remotely while sitting in my university office. Elise returned home at 11 p.m., not from rehearsal, but from Isaac's apartment. The timestamp proved it. She slipped into our bedroom, changed into pajamas, and mussed her hair to simulate sleep. When I returned home at midnight, she stirred convincingly. Bernard, how was your evening? Perfect, I replied, settling beside her. Just perfect. Saturday morning brought disaster disguised as breakfast. Elise hummed while making coffee, radiant with the glow of someone whose secret plans were falling into place. Julia and Emile sat at the kitchen table, unaware their world was about to disintegrate. Daddy, Emile said, looking up from his cereal, are we really going to Hungary? Elise's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. She shot me a look of pure panic, then forced a laugh. Hungary? What gave you that idea, sweetheart? Uncle Isaac was on the phone yesterday. He said something about Budapest being beautiful in winter. I kept my expression neutral, but inside rage built like pressure in a geothermal vent. Elise was already poisoning the children's minds, preparing them for a future that erased me completely. Uncle Isaac talks about lots of places, Elise said smoothly. That doesn't mean we're going anywhere. After breakfast, while Elise showered, I called Rhea Tran, a family law attorney whose reputation for ruthless efficiency preceded her. She agreed to see me immediately. Rhea's office was all sharp angles and intimidating law books. She listened to my story with the cold attention of a surgeon examining a tumor. How solid is your evidence? She asked. I slid a tablet across her desk, showing selected footage of Isaac and Elise together. Rhea's eyebrows rose fractionally. This is quite comprehensive. When did you install the surveillance? Last week. Everything's been fully documented. Good. Now, about their financial activities. Have you noticed any unusual withdrawals, account access, asset transfers? My stomach clenched. I haven't checked our accounts recently. Rhea's expression suggested this was a grave oversight. Mr. Fisher, if your wife is preparing for divorce litigation, she's likely been bleeding your assets for months. We need to lock down everything immediately. 2 hours later, I understood the scope of their betrayal. $60,000 had been transferred from our joint savings to an account in Elise's name only. Our investment portfolio had been quietly liquidated, the funds redirected to offshore holdings. Even my university retirement fund had been tampered with. This level of financial sophistication suggests professional guidance, Rhea said grimly. Your wife isn't just cheating, she's orchestrating grand larceny. I called Lyle from the parking garage, my hands shaking with fury. They've been robbing me blind, I told him, for months. What's the plan, Professor? War, I said simply. If they want to play financial hardball, I'll show them what a scientist with 30 years of patents can do. But first, I had to secure my children. I picked up Julia and Emil from their respective weekend activities, maintaining the facade of normality. At Julia's soccer game, other parents commented on how distracted Elise seemed lately. She's been working so hard with the orchestra, I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. That evening, while Elise attended what she claimed was a mandatory rehearsal, I sat my children down. I need to tell you something important, I began carefully. Mommy and I are having some problems. Julia's face crumpled. Are you getting divorced? I don't know yet, sweetheart, but whatever happens, you and Emil are the most important things in my life. No matter what anyone tells you, I will never stop fighting for you. Emil, younger and more trusting, climbed into my lap. Will we have to choose between you and Mommy? I hope not, buddy. I really hope not. Monday morning, the other shoe dropped with devastating force. I arrived at the university to find campus security waiting in my office, along with Dr. Margaret Stevens, the department head, and a woman I didn't recognize. Bernard, Dr. Stevens said, her face grave. This is Detective Sarah Murphy. There's been an allegation. My blood turned to ice. What kind of allegation? Detective Murphy stepped forward, her hand resting casually near her service weapon. Mr. Fisher, your wife has filed a complaint claiming you've been exhibiting threatening behavior, stalking, and making verbal threats against her and your brother-in-law. That's insane, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized how orchestrated this was. Strike first. Control the narrative. Paint me as the unstable aggressor. She's also obtained a temporary restraining order, the detective continued. You're prohibited from approaching your residence, your children's schools, or Mrs. Fisher's place of employment. Dr. Stevens looked genuinely sympathetic. Bernard, I have to suspend you pending investigation. It's protocol. I thought of the surveillance footage, the financial records, the months of documented betrayal. But I couldn't reveal those without admitting to potentially illegal surveillance. They'd trapped me perfectly. How long do I have to gather my research materials? I asked, forcing calm into my voice. You can take personal items today under supervision. Research materials will need to be reviewed. As I packed my briefcase under the watchful eyes of security, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Checkmate, E and I, Elise and Isaac, using my children as human shields while they dismantled my life piece by piece. That afternoon, homeless in my own city, I checked into a motel and called Lyle. He arrived within an hour, his face dark with anger. This is bullshit, Professor. Total setup. It's also brilliant, I admitted grudgingly. They've backed me into a corner where any defensive move looks like aggression. So what do we do? I stared out the motel window at the setting sun. Somewhere across town, my children were probably wondering why Daddy didn't come home. Elise was likely spinning a story about my breakdown, preparing them for my permanent absence. We play their game, I said finally. But we play it better. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If they wanted to portray me as dangerous, I'd give them something to really fear. Not violence. I wasn't a monster, despite what they'd driven me to become, but consequences. Real, devastating, inescapable consequences. I called an old friend from graduate school, now working for the state agriculture department. Within hours, I had access to comprehensive records on Isaac's urban planning projects, including several that showed disturbing patterns of environmental shortcuts and permit violations. Next, I contacted a journalist I'd worked with on agricultural stories, feeding him information about irregularities in certain municipal development projects. Nothing illegal on my part, just public records and expert analysis. By Wednesday, the first story broke. City planner under investigation for environmental violations. Isaac's photo was plastered across the local news websites, his professional reputation taking the first significant hit. Elise called my motel that evening, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. "What did you do?" she hissed. "I don't know what you mean," I replied calmly. "I'm simply a concerned citizen reviewing public environmental data. This is Isaac's career, Bernard, his livelihood." "Funny," I said. "I thought you cared about Isaac's livelihood when you were stealing mine." The war escalated with surgical precision over the next week. Every morning brought new revelations. Isaac's falsified environmental impact reports, Elise's questionable financial dealings with orchestra funds, even their joint investment in a Budapest property using stolen assets. But they fought back viciously. Thursday afternoon, I received a call from Ria Tran with devastating news. Bernard, Elise has filed for emergency custody. She's claiming you've been threatening the children. That's a complete fabrication. I know, but she has recordings, phone calls where you allegedly made concerning statements about not letting them take your children away. I closed my eyes, realizing they'd baited me into saying things that could be twisted. When's the hearing? Tomorrow. And Bernard, she's also filed criminal charges. Stalking, harassment, terroristic threats. There's a warrant. The room spun. They're trying to have me arrested? Yes. I'd recommend turning yourself in with an attorney present rather than waiting for them to pick you up. I hung up and immediately called Lyle. Pack everything from the lab, all our research, all the equipment. They're coming for me. Where should I take it? Storage unit on Riverside Drive, unit 247. Keys taped under the fire extinguisher in my office. I paused. And Lyle, if something happens to me, make sure the truth gets out. All of it. That evening, instead of waiting for arrest, I drove to Julia's school. I knew I was violating the restraining order, but I couldn't let them disappear in the night without seeing my children one last time. I waited in the parking lot until practice ended, watching Julia emerge from the building with her soccer teammates. When she saw my truck, her face lit up with relief and joy. Daddy! She ran toward me, but I held up my hand. Stay there, baby. Just listen, okay? Daddy might be going away for a little while. Why? Tears started in her eyes. Because sometimes adults make mistakes, and sometimes the system gets confused about who the good guys are. But no matter what anyone tells you, remember that Daddy loves you more than all the plants and all the greenhouses in the world. A security guard was approaching, probably alerted by Elise. I had maybe 30 seconds. The ring on Mommy's finger? I called out. That belonged to Grandma Fisher and her grandma before that. It's yours someday, Julia. Don't let anyone tell you different. Mr. Fisher! The security guard shouted. You need to leave immediately. I looked at my daughter one last time, memorizing her face. Be strong, baby. Daddy's going to fix this. As I drove away, I saw Elise's car pulling into the lot. The final confrontation was coming, whether I was ready or not. I returned to the motel and sat on the bed, staring at my phone. 2 missed calls from Detective Murphy. They were closing in, but I had one final move to make. The storage facility was deserted at 10 p.m. I used the cover of darkness to access Unit 247, where Lyle had stored everything from my laboratory. But I wasn't there for research equipment. Hidden behind boxes of agricultural journals was a metal case containing something I'd developed years ago but never published. A targeted herbicide that could destroy specific plant genetics while leaving others untouched. Theoretical work that had practical, devastating applications. Isaac's most prestigious project was the new Riverfront Park, featuring carefully cultivated heritage trees that had cost the city millions. Trees with very specific genetic markers. I spent the night preparing compounds, my hands steady despite the trembling in my soul. This wasn't about plants anymore. It was about making them understand that underestimating Bernard Fisher was a fatal mistake. Friday morning brought chaos disguised as justice. Detective Murphy called at 6 a.m. Mr. Fisher, we need you to come in for questioning. I'll be there by noon, I said calmly, with my attorney. Sir, you have active warrants. We can do this the easy way or... I hung up and called Ria Tran. The herbicide is already deployed, I told her. It'll take 72 hours to show effects, but when it does, Isaac's career will be more than over. It'll be criminal. Bernard, what are you talking about? What, herbicide? Doesn't matter now. What matters is that when those heritage trees start dying en masse, the investigation will trace back to environmental shortcuts Isaac made during the permitting process. Shortcuts that created perfect conditions for targeted plant destruction. Ria's voice was sharp with alarm. Bernard, you're talking about deliberate sabotage of municipal property. That's destruction of public resources, potential eco-terrorism charges. Only if they can prove intent, I said. And the beauty of biological agents is they look like natural disease progression. Isaac's environmental violations will appear to be the cause, not the result. This is insane. You need to turn yourself in immediately. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I drove to Elise's orchestra rehearsal, knowing she'd be there for the Friday morning practice. The Civic Center was buzzing with activity. Musicians carrying instrument cases, staff preparing for weekend performances. I waited in the lobby until intermission, then approached the rehearsal hall. Through the glass doors, I could see Elise in her first chair position, violin tucked under her chin, completely absorbed in the music. She looked beautiful, Even now, even knowing what she'd done, part of me remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 23 years ago. The passion in her playing, the grace of her movements, all of it corrupted by greed and betrayal. I entered the hall quietly, taking a seat in the back. Several musicians noticed me, but none immediately recognized the threat. Elise was lost in the music, her eyes closed as she navigated a particularly complex passage. When the movement ended, and she opened her eyes, her gaze found mine across the room. The color drained from her face. Bernard? Dr. Hartley, the conductor, looked confused. What brings you here? I stood slowly, every eye in the hall tracking my movement. I came to hear my wife play one last time. Security! Elise called out, her voice cracking. He's violating a restraining order. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I came to share something with everyone, a recording from yesterday evening. I pressed play. Isaac's voice filled the rehearsal hall, crystal clear. The old bastard doesn't suspect anything. We'll be in Budapest by Christmas with enough money to live comfortably for years. The kids will forget about him eventually. Children are adaptable. Then Elise's voice. What about the orchestra position he helped me get? The recommendation letters? Duck his recommendations. You earned that position on your back, not through his connections. The musicians sat in stunned silence as more damning conversation played. Discussions about forged documents, manipulated evidence, plans to disappear permanently. Elise lunged forward, trying to grab my phone. Turn it off. This is private. Privacy? I laughed, the sound echoing through the hall. You forfeited privacy when you stole my children's college funds to finance your Budapest escape plan. Dr. Hartley's face was pale. Several musicians were recording with their own phones now, the scandal spreading in real time through social media. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, backing toward the exit as security approached. I present Elise Fisher, first chair violinist and world-class thief. Enjoy your new concertmaster. I escaped the building as police sirens wailed in the distance, but the damage was done. By evening, Hash orchestral scandal was trending locally, and Elise's professional reputation was in ruins. The final act played out with brutal efficiency. Saturday morning, I surrendered myself to police custody with Ria Tran at my side. The charges were serious: stalking, harassment, violation of restraining orders, and, as of Friday evening, destruction of public property. The trees, I asked Ria during our brief consultation, started dying overnight. City officials are calling it an environmental disaster. Preliminary investigations are focusing on Isaac's permit violations, just as you predicted. I felt no satisfaction, only hollow triumph. And the children? Emergency custody hearing Monday. Elise is claiming you're dangerous, unstable. The recording from the orchestra hall doesn't help. It makes you look calculated, manipulative. From my jail cell, I watched the local news coverage with detached fascination. Isaac's professional downfall accelerated rapidly as the tree investigation revealed years of environmental shortcuts, falsified impact studies, and permit fraud. By Sunday, he was under federal investigation. Elise fared worse. The orchestra board met in emergency session and terminated her contract. Musicians who'd worked with her for years came forward with stories of financial irregularities, sexual harassment, and professional sabotage. The woman who'd called me a passive puppy was being devoured by the very community she'd tried to manipulate. Monday's custody hearing was a bloodbath. Judge Patricia Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s, known for cutting through manipulation to reach truth. Mrs. Fisher, Judge Morrison said, reviewing the case files, you've made serious allegations about your husband's mental state and potential danger to your children. Yet evidence suggests you've been stealing marital assets while conducting an affair with his brother. Can you explain this contradiction? Elise, looking haggard after her weekend of professional destruction, tried to recover her composure. Your Honor, my husband has become completely unhinged. He's been stalking me, threatening my career, destroying public property. Mr. Fisher, the judge interrupted, turning to me, these are serious charges. How do you respond? I stood slowly, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost and everything I'd become. Your Honor, I've made mistakes. I violated a restraining order to see my children. I may have pushed legal boundaries in my investigation of financial fraud, but I never threatened my wife or children with violence. I simply refused to be destroyed quietly. The environmental sabotage? I met her eyes directly. I'm a botanist, Your Honor. I understand plant genetics, soil chemistry, environmental factors that affect plant health. If someone suggests I deliberately destroyed public property, through biological agents. They'll need to prove intent, not just capability. Judge Morrison studied me for a long moment. Mr. Fisher, the evidence suggests your wife and brother-in-law have indeed committed substantial financial crimes against you and potentially against the public trust. However, you've also demonstrated a concerning pattern of escalating retaliation. She paused, consulting her notes. I'm awarding temporary custody of Julia and Emil Fisher to their paternal grandmother, Esther Fisher, pending further investigation. Both parents will have supervised visitation rights. Mr. Fisher, you will undergo psychological evaluation and anger management counseling. Mrs. Fisher, you will submit to financial auditing and repay stolen marital assets. As the gavel fell, I saw Elise's face crumple in defeat. She'd lost the children, her career, and her financial security. Isaac sat in the gallery, his own legal troubles mounting by the hour. But I felt no victory, only emptiness. 3 months later, I sat in my mother's kitchen, watching Julia and Emil do homework at the table where I'd once sat as a child. The psychological evaluation had cleared me of dangerous tendencies, finding instead a man who'd been pushed beyond reasonable limits and responded with methodical precision rather than violence. The financial auditing had revealed the true scope of Elise and Isaac's betrayal. Over $300,000 stolen through various schemes, funds that were slowly being recovered through asset seizure and court orders. Isaac faced federal charges for environmental fraud and faced likely prison time. His urban planning career was finished, his professional licenses revoked. Elise had disappeared entirely, reportedly living in a Budapest boarding house, her orchestra career destroyed, her reputation in ruins. The extradition process for financial crimes was proceeding slowly. "Daddy," Julia said, looking up from her math homework, "do you think Mommy will ever come back?" I studied my daughter's face, seeing both hopeful innocence and protective wariness. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens, we're going to be okay. All of us." "Even if you're scary sometimes?" Emil asked with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Especially then," I said, "because sometimes being scary means protecting the people you love." My mother, now 71 and frailer than I like to admit, placed her hand on mine. "You did what you had to do, Bernard. Your father would have been proud." "Would he?" I asked. "I destroyed people, Mom, systematically, deliberately." "You defended your family against thieves and liars," she corrected. "You used your intelligence instead of your fists. That's what makes you better than them." That evening, after the children were asleep, I walked out to my new greenhouse, smaller than before, but functional. My research was resuming slowly with the university's cautious support. The agricultural community had rallied around me once the full scope of the financial crimes became public. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won. Happy now?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I didn't win anything. We all lost. But even as I typed those words, I knew they weren't entirely true. I'd learned something crucial about myself during those dark months. When pushed far enough, the quiet botanist could become something much more dangerous. The capacity for calculated destruction lived inside me now, a knowledge that would never fully disappear. A second text arrived. "The children will hate you someday. They'll understand what you really are." This time, I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted the message and blocked the number. Elise was wrong. My children already understood what I really was. I was their father, someone who'd fought for them when the world tried to tear their family apart. Someone who'd paid a terrible price to keep them safe. The final text came from Lyle, now managing my research lab. "Results are in on the new drought-resistant strain, 40% improvement over the previous generation. The grant committee is impressed." I smiled, feeling something like peace for the first time in months. Life continued forward as it always did. The seeds I'd planted would grow into something useful, something that helped rather than destroyed. In the greenhouse, surrounded by the quiet breathing of growing things, I finally understood that revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about ensuring consequences. Elise and Isaac had faced theirs. Now, I would face mine, whatever they might be. The puppy was gone, replaced by something harder but ultimately more honest. And in the end, that might be enough.